like to now call to order the Carson City Audit Committee. I'd like to take roll call now.
Chairperson Bertrand.
Here.
Member Bagwell. Here. Member Byrne. Here. Member Ferguson. Member Mayhorn.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. Okay, the public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Carson City Audit Committee. In order for members of the public to participate in the committee's consideration of an agenda item, the committee strongly encourages members of the public to comment on an agenda item during the item itself. No action may be taken on a matter raised under public comment unless the item has been specifically included on the agenda as an item upon which action may be taken. So with that, do we need to ask for public comment? Is there any public comment at this time? All right. Moving on, I'd like a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second of February
14th,
2017, just so we put the date.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, now I'd like to have a motion to adopt the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adopt agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Moving on to agenda item 6A. At this time, Moss Adams, Mark Stryanka is going to be discussing with us, giving us an update on the audit work program. So, Mark, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark Stryanka from Moss Adams. This will be very brief. So last meeting, we presented to the Small Works Projects Review. This meeting will be presenting the Public Guardian Review. The remaining two projects will be two testing. One's a procurement testing and an IT controls testing. We should be finishing up the procurement testing this month, and then we're going to get busy to get the IT controls finished by the June 30th. Everything's within budget. In terms of looking forward to end of the fiscal year, I'm assuming we've had a placeholder of $10,000 for sort of doing auditing relative to performance metrics. I'm assuming that's not, we're not going to exercise that, so you can anticipate a $10,000 savings, at the end of the fiscal year. There were no new reports from the hotline as of our last meeting. I think that's about it. Not very exciting, but
Okay. Any comments on the update? I'm kind of curious, in June, when in June do you think that might be ready? Just because I'm thinking about planning our next meeting. You say by June 30, so.
procurement.
Nancy Paulson, Chief Financial Officer. Have you guys received all the remaining? I think
Scylla was waiting for something.
Okay.
Well, let's just, when we get to the end of the meeting, let's just look at the calendar and not worry about too much about that. Okay, thanks.
Okay, moving on to the next item. At this time, Mark Stryanka of Moss Adams is going to review our audit findings and take a look at what we still have outstanding and what we need to close. Go ahead.
Yes, okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, do you by chance have a color version? Okay, so I will point you to them, and I don't either, so I don't have any advantage. If I opened my computer, I would, but, okay, so our standard cover sheet, okay, since last meeting, we closed out and fully archived the community facility cost recovery study, so that is now in the archive. You have in this report 2 new completed findings, both within the internal controls review, and 7 new validated findings. The validated findings were the 7 that you identified in our last meeting and asked us to do so, and we did. So I will walk you through those. So if you turn to page 2, which should look like this, just one row at the top, and that's for the employee efficiency study. So the finding that you asked us to validate was, in essence, the IT strategic plan. We took a look at that. It's very thorough. The company Next Level we happen to be familiar with. They're solid in this space, and so we said we would take a look. We did take a look. It's certainly comprehensive and looks good. The other findings that we validated are under the internal controls review. So if you turn to page 3, the three highlighted items are all validated items, and then I'll point out to you which ones are the closed items, completed items. So all 3 of these had to do with cash handling. Actually, sorry. The first one had to do with sort of transporting of cash, and the city has instituted a designated person, assigned deputy to make those transfers. We were able to validate through looking at an employee sort of time card and sort of direction to that individual for those duties to validate. Since we haven't seen it happen, we're looking to see, sufficient proof that it is in fact occurring, which it is. And then the next 2 findings below that also have to do with cash handling. They're covered by the new policy that's been implemented, and actually the city's doing training, and I failed to put in here the dates, 2 dates in May, and you'll remind us when those are. Do you know off the top of your head? Sorry.
May 8th and May 16th,
8th.
and then we're going to do some other individual training as well.
There you go. So, which is great, and that's just to make a little plug for that. Often our clients, they'll institute a new policy, and then like you institute new software, where's the training, right? And so that's happening, so that's great. If you turn the page to page 4, similar sort of quote-unquote evidence or validation that these are happening, both covered by the policy and will be covered by the training, and those are findings 27 and 28, the highlighted ones. And then, so those are the 7 validated findings. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll go one more. If you turn to page 5, and then I'll come back to the completed findings, you will see finding number 41, and this had to do with security, and what we looked at here was there's a report from the security system that was implemented, and actually it's pretty impressive how much data it collects in reporting activity, but that was implemented, and so again, to validate that, we looked at the reporting that system produces. And then if you go back to page 4, findings 26 and 30 are the 2 newly completed findings since our last meeting. And do you want to talk to them?
We have a video,
And,
too.
okay.
Do you want me to do that now?
Sure.
We also have the Treasurer's Office and the IT department developed a video for the cash training, and so we were going to go ahead and play just a portion of that video, if you'd like us to do that right now.
Hello, fellow city cash handlers. Today, you will be receiving training on the city's cash handling policy. We have over 20 departments within the city that accept cash transactions. As such, we are all guardians of the city funds. Pretty important, right? Cash handling, it is your job. Whether you take in lots of money or you collect pennies, it's all important and must be accounted for. So, let's get started learning. Cash handling controls. There are 5 principles of good cash handling processes: segregation of duties, security, reconciliation, management review, and documentation. What is included in cash handling, you might ask? It's not just cash. It includes your coin, currency, checks, money orders, credit, and debit cards. Today, we will focus on cash and checks only. First, let's talk about risks and controls. Who and what are at risk? Both you and the money are at risk. You may ask yourself, why? In the cash collection process, you are just as important as the cash. The controls that we will discuss are designed to protect both you and the cash you are handling. Risks that you and the cash may face are: cash could be lost or stolen, bank statement or revenue report doesn't agree with the departmental records, no audit trail of proper documentation, finger pointing and accusations or suspicion, and lost revenue. To avoid these risks, a plan to collect cash should be in place. However, if you don't have a plan in place, here are a few tips for developing a plan. Is a change fund needed? Note that your change fund is not the same as your petty cash. So if you are going to make change, then you need a change fund. To get authorization, you'll need to contact the treasurer and the CFO. A department may have several change drawers at a single location, but each drawer should be assigned to only one employee. For example, in the treasurer's office, we each have a cash drawer for a total of 5 drawers. Each employee is responsible for their own cash drawer. The change drawer should be balanced each and every day. Never, ever use the change fund for making purchases, cashing checks, giving loans or travel advances, making change for personal use, or any other non-city transaction. 4 basic steps to cash handling process are accepting the payment, preparing the deposit and sending it to the bank, reconciling the deposits, reporting outages. Upon taking a payment, you will want to verify the payment for legitimacy and accuracy. Things to look for on a check are the date. If the check is dated more than 30 days in the past, it should not be accepted. If the check has a date in the future, it is considered post-dated and should not be accepted. Checks should be payable to Carson City and the applicable department. For example, Carson City Treasurer or Carson City Parks, etc. Be diligent in checking the numeric amount against the written legal amount to be sure they are the same. If they differ, then the legal written amount is the amount to process the check for. Be sure the check is signed. Check the bottom to make sure the bank insignia is there. Check for the routing number and the account number on the bottom of the check as well. Upon receiving a check, it should be endorsed immediately and entered when the customer is at your counter, and the customer should receive a receipt. When a customer hands you cash, be sure to count and verify the currency. If it is over $1,000, get a second employee to verify the money, and then use your counterfeit PIN on any bills, 50 or 100, to check for authenticity. Place the currency in the view of yourself and the customer. Enter the payment into your cashiering program. Count back the change out loud to the customer and give them a receipt. When the transaction is complete, you will then put the cash into your cash drawer and lock the drawer. Your cash key must be kept in your sole custody and should never be shared with anyone or left in your drawer. Listed here are some common ways for you to spot a counterfeit bill. The easiest way, of course, is to use your counterfeit detection pin. There is starch in the paper of real money, and therefore, when using the pin on a real bill, it will turn yellow. However, if the bill is fake, it will turn dark brown or black. If by chance a bill tests positive as counterfeit, you do not want to put yourself in danger. Do not pass the bill back to the passer. Delay the passer with some excuse, but no need to lunge or hold them captive. Have your supervisor call sheriff, dispatch, to inform the police that you just took in suspicious currency. Observe the passer's description, get their license plate or their ID or something, and do not handle the bill. Put it in a plastic bag or an envelope. Remember, if you are passed a counterfeit bill, you own it. So when accepting cash, it pays to be knowledgeable about the crime of the counterfeiting. Next, we will discuss how to process payments that are received in the mail. One person should open the mail and immediately and restrictively endorse each check and post the checks into the cashiering system as soon as possible. Checks intended for other departments should be forwarded either by interoffice or by hand. Do not send cash through the interoffice mail system. It must be hand-delivered to the treasurer's office and verified in dual control. If you have monies that you cannot identify what department it might belong to, then give the treasurer's office a call. So the monies have been collected and posted to the customer's account. Now what? You want to secure, balance, deposit, reconcile. Securing the cash. Only one person shall have access to the cash drawer during any one shift. The cash drawer and receipts are balanced at the end of each shift. All cash collections must be placed in a sealed, numbered bank deposit bag immediately upon balancing. This bag, then locked in your cash drawer or locked in the vault, can't be moved. You may want to consider installing a contact alarm that will alert you when the drawer is opened. You may even consider installing a camera to observe the safe and the cash drawers. The vault or safe should be located where it is continually visible to department employees. Access should be limited to supervisory and authorized personnel. The lock or the combo should be changed every 2 years or when a key employee leaves the department. Balance your money in your cash drawer. Once all payments from the day are removed, the ending cash balance should be back to your starting total. Keep an adding machine tape in the drawer from prior day's balancing in case of any outages. You will be able to backtrack the prior day's cash inventory. Be prepared as the Treasurer's Office will be implementing surprise cash counts starting fiscal year 17-18. So you counted your cash drawer and it doesn't balance. All cash drawers outages must be reported to the cash over and short accounts in your departmental revenue report. If a customer gives you too much money within a $5 threshold, a journal entry is allowed as miscellaneous revenue. It is not cost-effective to bill or refund outages under $5. Deposits should be done by someone other than the person who collected the cash. Deposits should be made every day that money is collected in excess of $300 and not less than once per week. Deposit slips are to be clearly and accurately written. The cash and checks are then attached to the deposit slip. Complete the bank log sheet with the bank bag number and the amount of the deposit written on it. The completed deposit is then put in the clear banking bag and sealed. Transportation of the deposits should be done by the city banking courier. He is bonded, insured, and carrying a weapon. Cash reconciliation must be performed by a person with no cash handling responsibilities. Reconcile receipts to the departmental financial reports on a bi-monthly basis to verify the processing or recording of all transactions. Maintain proof of these reconciliations with the signature of the preparer and the supervisor or manager of the department. Segregation of duties is the most important control and the most difficult to manage. If you don't think you have enough staff to segregate the duties, then it is important that mitigating controls, such as increased monitoring or a detailed supervisory review, be put in place. The department can write up modification plans to existing cash handling policy with explanation of the alternative procedures and the corresponding controls to be implemented. Present the request for modification to the treasurer for review and approval. Carson City's policy is a general guideline of cash handling procedures. Each department must develop its own supplemental procedures to address their unique needs. Departmental management must ensure that each person handling cash or funds in their department receives training during the first quarter of their cash handling assignments. Refresher training is required every 2 years for all staff with cash handling responsibilities. I hope you've enjoyed the training video and learned some valuable cash handling procedures. Thank you.
I was going to shut it off after halfway through, but it was too fun.
Yeah, I commend you. That was enjoyable. You know, I think that's going to be effective.
Treasurer's office and the IT department. And that kind of led me into one little thing. Someone had asked last time about how much was in the cash over and short account. So for the fiscal year 16, there was $500, approximately $500 in that, so out of a $150 million budget.
I was just going to add, I can unequivocally tell you that none of our clients have done that.
The video?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Can I ask?
I liked it because it was short and it had some exciting points to it, so it'll keep attention.
So is that video able to be in policy tech, and that we can monitor and ensure that we're adhering to the every 2 years they get the refresher course? And so, right? I just want to just double check that it can be done in policy tech so that we can track the effectiveness and that it actually, you can see that people, and we can hold them accountable. I mean, the whole objective in the end is to say, yes, you've had the training, we've provided it. Okay, so that's wonderful, and nice job on the video.
So back to you. Yeah.
Back to me. Okay, well, so as far as the update for the items, are there any questions from any other committee members here that?
Sorry, I was just going to mention, so if you're comfortable with the validation of the findings, then for the next meeting, the employee efficiency study will get fully archived.
Right, that's what I was going to think, is when you have to have a motion to close that.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to see if there's any other questions beforehand, before we go into that, on anything else that was discussed. Okay, I guess, I'm looking for a motion for closing the employee efficiency study and accepting that, and then closing that and making a recommendation to the board.
Motion to close the employee efficiency study?
Second the motion.
Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Do we want to work on internal controls next?
Yeah, well, I was going to take a look at, yeah, go ahead. Did you have some comments you wanted to make on that?
No, more just that, do we want to actually, let's just talk about the two that are open, unless anybody wants to discuss, because I think we can consider the rest closed. And so that just leaves us number 22, right? And 26 is our open items. In internal
22
controls?
and 32.
32.
Oh, I'm not seeing 26 isn't got a
Yeah.
good color. Okay, wait a
Yeah.
minute. 32.
Sorry.
And so then the discussion for me is, let's see, where are we on document key process? Why 32? So I want to talk about 32. We don't have a plan, not until December, to close that one or complete it? Do we have a progress?
So I think that I think that's like a work in progress, and, the departments are continually updating their policies and procedures. I think that they're working on getting everything into into Policy Tech. So I just pushed that out till the end of the year, just to make sure it's complete.
Because I thought last time, didn't we discuss that we only had a couple of the elected officials that were not complying or were not putting items in Policy Tech? But I just wanted, everyone is now, right? It's my understanding that both of
correct.
them have entered the items in the Policy Tech. So I just wanted to update the committee that everyone is now utilizing it.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so we've made huge progress, and so we're just down to a few more to check off, is what you're indicating, and then we'll be able to close this item? Oh, nice, very nice. The objective for me is to start to get to the report that only the active items are before us, and we don't just keep
So in other words,
close all of them except for number 22 and 32.
Okay.
Unless somebody has an objection. We clean them up.
The whole thing is closed.
Right, right.
Do I hear a motion, Supervisor Bagwell?
Well, I'm in it now, huh? I opened my mouth. Okay. I move to close all items in the internal controls review except for 22 and 32.
I second the motion.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. I don't know if we had decided that in the past, but I think that is a good policy. You know, it kind of cleans it up rather than just, I mean, sometimes there's a few items, like the next one, you know, if there's just a few items, maybe just keep it all open until it's all closed up, but you know, just kind of make that policy for the future. Okay, then, are there any other?
Which leaves me the one, then we have one, and this is just a general discussion that I think we should have on number 5, on the policy and procedures review. So what do we feel when it's an ongoing item? So this one deals with changing procedures ongoing, that we want to look at all the municipal codes, but I don't see the city tackling this as a single task of saying, we're going to look at every single policy or municipal code that we have and draw these out. But I think from the Board of Supervisors level and staff level, we've been doing is every time we open that chapter of code, we will address this. And it's now just a common practice that we've implemented. So what do you guys feel about just going ahead and closing this, because it'll just be done? Yeah, it's an implemented process.
I guess as long as there is a procedure in place that we know it's an ongoing process and
Right.
it's being done, yeah, I would say that that'd probably be a good idea, because otherwise you have this item open all the time, and it's
Yeah, and a good example is we just updated our liquor license, and we removed the fees and made it as a separate. So that's a great example of one we just did. So I think we've implemented the recommendation, but we're just going to have to do that as an ongoing basis, because we're certainly not going to address this as a single item. So I'm kind of recommending, unless you guys see differently, that we go ahead and close item 5 as an implemented practice.
Can we document that that's the practice we're going to take? I mean, is there some documentation that that's the approach of the supervisors, to take it chapter by chapter?
I'm not sure what documentation we can
Other than
actually
what you
come
just
up
said.
with.
Other than what you
Right.
just said, yeah.
I mean, we have a practice that we accomplished it, but I don't see a policy or something that we can implement or document other than every time a chapter's open, we review it.
Right. So that's all I'm saying, is that documented, that process, as it relates to this. Because I'd hate to, see us come back a couple years later and then see that it was closed and then just have to revisit why did we took that approach. That's all.
I'm trying to think of, so what are you recommending, though?
Probably under the status comments. It's the supervisor's practice to review, the municipal code chapter by chapter as it
Or
comes
when
up.
the chapter opens.
When the chapter opens.
When a chapter opens. I don't mind changing the status comment to reflect that, and then closing it.
Yeah.
That's
what I'm
what you're
saying, yeah.
suggesting is we update that the status be changed to, it will be done when that chapter is open at the board
Yeah.
level.
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
I'm getting at. Yeah.
I could live with that. But you guys. Does that work for staff too? Okay.
Okay, do you want to repeat back that motion?
So I would move to close item 5 on policy and procedure review with an update in the status comment to indicate that when a chapter is brought for review before the Board of Supervisors, this action will be implemented at that time.
I second the motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So kind of in conclusion, we've really kind of cleaned up our list here. Really, based on what we've talked about, the item number 1, the employee efficiency study, policy procedure review is going to be closed. And on internal controls review, the next time we'll only see those 2 items to review when we come up. And I think that is good, because it keeps us moving along and addressing them and then closing them.
And then we'll just add the public guardian
Yeah.
into the next one, right.
Good. Okay, is there any public comment at this time? Hearing, or is there any public? Okay. So, I don't know if they're public or not out there. Okay, With that, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, item number 6C. And this is where Mark Stranka from Los Adams is going to review the study they just done, the review of the Public Guardian program. It was very interesting reading. So I'm glad we have plenty of time to talk about this one. Mark, would you like to go ahead and give us your overview of what you found?
I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Colleen Rosillas and Tammy Lohr, who did the fine work in this report. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon. Colleen Rosillas with Moss Adams. So we conducted a review of the Public Guardian's asset disposition process. We talked about this at the last audit committee meeting, that there were some questions about how the asset disposition process worked. And so we went ahead and worked with the Public Guardian to look at the process, identify opportunities for improvement. And so the report's in front of you. We had 8 findings in the report. Important to note, we had no compliance findings as part of this. In part, that is because of the way that guardianship is assigned to the public guardian in Carson City, is that the court orders for wards in the court order language, it states specifically that certain parts of Nevada state law related to asset disposition, appraisals, advertisement, things like that, are not required. Nevada state law says if the ward has assets under $5,000, they don't have to do those things. And then for some under $10,000, they don't have to do those things. And really, in practice, in Carson City, the court system says, if you take guardianship of a ward who has assets of pretty much any value, except for a house, you can go ahead and dispose of them in the most efficient way possible and don't necessarily have to follow these steps, which is why we don't have any compliance findings. We do have a lot of process improvement findings. So we'll cover those. I just wanted to cover a couple of things. So first is that the Public Guardian's Office, it's primarily funded by the general fund. They are allowed to, and in some cases do, get fees back from wards' estates, but frequently these folks don't have any estates to actually dispose of and don't really have any funding except for their Medicaid. And as a result, there isn't a lot of funding in the office. And so there are 3 FTEs, 2 folks who are social workers, and one's an account clerk. The attorney operates primarily on a pro bono basis. The county does reimburse a little bit to their office on a quarterly basis, but it certainly doesn't cover the total costs. And the office is also looking into using volunteers in order to try to address some of the workload. And in particular, the workload, we'd like to note, has increased. So there were 37 wards in 2011. There are 85 right now. And so the 2 folks who do the bulk of the work in the Public Guardian's Office are doing medical appointments, grocery shopping, all of the legal requirements, trying to dispose of estates, dealing with their homes for 85 folks. So it's quite a bit of work. Primarily, the job of the Public Guardian is driven by Nevada state law. The Board of Supervisors appoints the Public Guardian. The court assigns the Public Guardian, but there really is not a lot of oversight of the Public Guardian. And I think that's kind of why we're here today, is that not a lot of folks know about what's really happening in that office. So we looked at the files and the estates of wards for whom the Public Guardian had liquidated assets over the last 3 years. And in those 3 years, only 8 were liquidated. So it's a pretty rare occurrence. We ended up looking closely through the files of 4 of them, and then we looked at the court orders of all 8 to ensure that the assets were disposed of accordingly. So again, we had no compliance findings. We also wanted to note, in terms of commendations, the Public Guardian staff works a lot, and they work really hard. You can imagine that taking care of 85 folks who are typically at the end of their lives is a 24/7 job, and they really work a lot and are highly dedicated. And in addition, they really try to rely on folks like the not-for-profit attorney and interns to be able to backfill. It's quite a lot. So we really want to commend them on their work ethic, and also for making time to participate in this process with us, which we know isn't always the easiest when auditors walk in your door. So I'm going to cover our number 1 finding, which is that there really isn't any oversight of what the Public Guardian does. While the Board of Supervisors appoints the Public Guardian, there really is not any supervision that occurs. So the Public Guardian every year files an annual report to the court for each ward, but there are not reports of all of the activities, all of the assets under purview, any staffing changes, anything related to the actual operations of the public guardian. And we would recommend that's the most important thing that the guardian does, is just start getting in front of the board, at least on an annual basis, saying, this is how many wards we have, this is what we're doing, this is how many assets are under our supervision, and anything that may come up. And that will help to have the board understand exactly what is under their purview, and it is your fiduciary responsibility as board members, but also have the public guardian be able to create more knowledge in the community of what the public guardian does. Are there any questions about that before I hand it over to Tammy to talk about the process?
Just real quick, how do they determine when there's a cutoff at $5,000 and $10,000 on the asset value? How is that value determined? Because if you're looking at, semi-depreciated assets, how do you really determine what the fair market value is?
Yeah, an initial inventory of the assets are done as part of the first court order, the first application for guardianship. So it's estimated, and then it can be amended over time, but it's just an initial estimation when that goes
Who makes the estimate?
Laura does.
Laura Miles, I'm the pro bono attorney that. I'm Laura Miles. I'm with the RSVP Carson and Rural Elder Law Program, and for the past 19 years, I've been the attorney that handles the public guardian cases, simply because over 95% of her cases, there are no fees available for attorneys, and no other attorney in Carson City wants those cases. And yes, the initial inventory, we look at whether they have a vehicle, we look at what bank accounts, we get bank statements, we look at their house, we go online to see if we can get a rough estimate of what the house is worth, if they have a house or a mobile home. The personal property, the guardian goes into the house and sort of looks around to see what's there, takes photographs to see what might be in the house, if there's anything that might be of value. As an example, though, our last 5 cases have pretty much been homeless, so there's really no assets to speak of. And so if the properties are worth, if there is a residence, then of course we do get a realtor involved. All sales are through a realtor who does an appraisal or does some computation as to what the comparative appraisal is for the property. But that's the basic initial inventory, is bank statements, anything we get in the mail proving that they may have some sort of investment account or whatever other account they might have.
What form does the accounting information take? Is it like in a software program, or is it handwritten ledgers, or, if we were to take a look, or I'm not sure what you were looking at, what were you looking at to see the value of the assets and how that's summarized?
In each file in the court order, it's just a table really, and it'll say, vehicle, home, bank account at whatever bank. I think we do have an example in the report.
We try to attach bank statements if we have them, and generally, one of us will go online to NADA Guides, which I find more reliable than Blue Book actually, and get an outlook of what the vehicle is worth. We'll attach that if the vehicle is worth anything. As far as the house is concerned, we attach a copy of the printout from the county assessor. So that's how we do the initial appraising and present that to the court. A lot of times, though, as I said, the last 5, we've just basically, there's clothing and personal property. There's no other assets, so we don't have anything to attach or any appraisal. It would cost more to appraise than the property's worth. We have one right now. There is a motor home, but the motor home is a toxic waste hazard and would require a great deal of cost to even clean it up. So it's basically valueless.
Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it on to Tammy Lohr, who was the lead analyst on this project. She'll walk you through our recommendations related to organization, documentation, and the process itself.
Hi, for the record, Tammy Lohr with Moss Adams. As Colleen mentioned, the current asset disposition process is compliant with what's required in court orders, but we did identify some opportunities for improvement within the actual process itself, and those findings kind of fall under 3 buckets. There's documentation, organization, and technology. So overall, we'd like to see the department maintain more documentation related to ward assets. For example, photographs that document the state of the residence and the personal property would provide support for the staff decision to forfeit, demolish, donate, or sell those assets. So the example that Laura just provided, we would just want to see a photograph to show that that really is a toxic waste hazard, and that would be sufficient documentation for that. We would also like to see them create and maintain an inventory of assets that are for sale, as well as receipts documenting each of those sales. In addition to maintaining this documentation, we would recommend that the department organize the files in a way that allows for better tracking of the assets. It's clear from the way that files are currently organized that the public guardian staff really do focus on the care and well-being of each ward. The site visit notes, the care conference notes, all of those are well documented and well organized. However, the documents that relate to the ward assets, they could be better organized to kind of show how things went in that whole process. To help them track these assets, we recommend that they implement an inventory tracking form that we've provided to them. It includes fields including there's an item description, there's whether or not an appraisal was conducted if it's necessary, there's whether or not a liquidator was used and what their commission percentage would be, and the amount of the sale as well as the date of the deposit into that ward's guardianship account. So finally, to further improve organization, we do recommend that the guardian transition from using paper files to electronic files. That should help them be more manageable because there are a lot of documents. Many of the files were actually contained in multiple file brackets, and it should just make the operations just overall more efficient. So we're happy to take any other questions that you guys have.
So when we talk about the documentation in a file and moving from paper to electronic, are you suggesting then that we more or less really set up a scanning methodology so they get a receipt, scan it in, and it documents to that file so that at any time you can pull up the documentation and say yes, instead of having, if you look at some of my receipts for tax purposes, it's a little receipt from Walmart or so that they're all the same paper size, that type of, is that really what the recommendation is, looking to go to a scanning methodology for each file?
Right, so we would want to see, well, overall, it would provide better organization for each ward's file because you have distinct folders for each purpose. And so right now, there's only so many pockets in a folder, and so you can't necessarily divide each section according to the way that you would necessarily want to. So it is to provide the receipts. So we would want, a separate file section related to ward assets. That should include the inventory tracking form, and we do provide on that what supporting documentation should be listed for each of those. So if a liquidator was used, we would want to see an attachment that would be to the written formal agreement with that liquidator that shows what that commission percentage is, and we would just need all of those, like all of the T's to be crossed and the I's to be dotted by providing all the information within that inventory tracking form as well as the supporting documentation.
Supervisor Bagwell, were you also just getting at, so what's the level of sophistication of technology we need, right? And so something relatively simple in terms of scanning, yes.
Yeah, it could absolutely just be done on the regular old Microsoft document server, and you can insert either the file name or a link to the file in that inventory tracking sheet to be able to get right to what you need. But it should, at a minimum, all be in the same place.
And actually, I was just going to say one sort of overarching comment was the the cash handling video was really perfect timing, because the recommendations are just as much for the ward as they are for the staff, right? So that they can protect themselves of the documentation of what they've looked at and what they've inventoried, et cetera. So it's a dual purpose set of recommendations.
Well, I think overall, when I read this, I think that is a superb comment for the staff, is to ensure that you're protected. So I don't think there's any accusations that anyone's doing anything, but this will preserve that and protect you, that no one can accuse you of doing something 2 years later or 3 years later that, you know, my mom had a gold necklace and you let the liquidator have it for $1 and it was gold or it had diamonds in it. So I think that this is just truly a protection for everyone, and we must document. And so one of the questions that I had, and I had talked with our CFO earlier, is about adding in here the recommendation that they actually do the segregation of duties with the bank reconciliations, or that they validate that the bank account information matches the ward file. And so I just feel strongly, as a protection, again, for the staff and the wards, that we need that secondary look that goes in, because they only have, like you said, 2 staff. And so, not that I want to add a workload into another section, but they have to do the annual review anyway for the financial statements, but I would be more comfortable that quarterly they did a validation, and we could look at that then in the reporting requirement, and that the board gets a certification quarterly, the Board of Supervisors, that they have reconciled the bank statements to the ward accounts and that everything's in compliance and it's balanced. So, and Nancy indicated to me that she didn't think that would be an issue, right?
Right.
Double check, right? Okay.
Yeah, and that's just for I think there's 2 accounts that are actually through the city's tax ID, not the individual wards' accounts, correct?
And let's talk about, well, if you don't mind. Okay. So one of the issues that I had when I read through the report, and I did speak with Deborah concerning that too, is that dollars were deposited into the city's account instead of the ward's bank account, and it was utilized as a methodology to get the client eligible for Medicaid. And that, you know, that the assets. And so I'm concerned, again, that all paperwork and the timing of deposits and movement of money, that anything we report on behalf of a ward is actually accurate. And so what process can we do to ensure that the records of the individual ward are also reconciled, and that the money in the main account has been, maybe that's the way, that any deposits in the main account when a ward has their own bank account, that money's been moved. And I would suggest you guys can do that when you look at the main account, right? To say, here's a deposit for Johnny of $1,000. He has his own bank account. That money should have been moved and deposited to his own bank account. That's really what I meant.
This is Laura Miles again. On that particular ward, when they asked us the questions, and I know when they asked Debbie the questions, one of the things that we forgot to show them, simply, trying to get all the information to the auditors, that particular ward, we have a standing order for fees, and so those monies were transferred into the city account as fees under the order from the court for fees to the guardian for that. So that money, when a ward is on Medicaid, and this is something we try to do with all the wards, is get them on Medicaid. Otherwise, they have to be on county assistance, and the city has to pay for them. They can only have so much money in their accounts. And if they get close to being over that amount, then what we do is I get an order from the court for each and every ward stating that the guardian has the right to take fees. So if their burial's paid for, if everything else that is a future expense that we can anticipate is paid for, but they're getting too much money in their account, as that particular ward was, and they're going to go over and lose their Medicaid, which means we have no means of paying for their care, then the public guardian can reach into that account and take money for fees. And in that particular case, she did have an order for fees, and so that money was taken out for fees. It was also to keep the ward on Medicaid, but it was taken out for fees to the public guardian's office.
I guess I'm not understanding the transaction. I'm understanding what you're saying, but should not the money have been deposited into the ward account and then the fee check written from the ward account to the city's, it's actually revenue that the city receives as a fee. So potentially what we need to do, again, is just make sure the deposits and the documentation are appropriately tracking so that it doesn't appear to be a methodology to get them qualified for Medicaid. It's truly a fee that was taken. And so I'm just questioning, should the money have been deposited into the ward's account and then the fee taken? I guess that's the question.
I agree with that.
This is Deborah
Supervisor
Marsling, and that, I looked into it after we spoke, and she had actually been, she's been on since 2013, so she was already on Medicaid. And so I think it was an error at the time to put it in that account rather than put it in her account, write the check, which would have taken care of the problem. At the time, I only had two, it was myself, and I had two part-time people, and I was doing everything. So since then, I've added staff, and it's been a little better.
So are you saying that was maybe an isolated incident?
Yes.
Yes, but she did have the court order for fees, and that's in all the cases. She will call me. In fact, we have two wards right now. We don't have court orders for fees, and Debbie called me yesterday and goes, "Oh, we're getting too close to the Medicaid over limit, so we need fees." So we do that on pretty much every single case, unless, of course, we have to do an annual accounting because the ward has a large estate, more than $10,000, then we ask for fees from the court each year. So.
Okay, so then I've got a different question. So now what I'm catching on to here is you're leaving the dollars in the account to pay for other care needs, and you're only taking fees that the cities that we're eligible to receive if they're going to hit the Medicaid eligibility. So in other words, the city's in last resort. I guess that's a good way to put it. We pay ourselves last instead of paying ourselves first.
Correct. In many, many cases, the city doesn't get any money until the ward's deceased. I can think of at least 5 cases off the top of my head where it lasted more than 6 years, and the city got what was left in the ward's account after they passed away, which was less than $1,000. So the entire time that we had guardianship, the city got nothing until they did pass away.
And I'm not opposed to what we're discussing as the policy that you're trying to care for the ward in the best possible way that you can and meet their needs. And do you want to drain them of everything with city fees versus we wait to the last? And again, I just say we're last in the line of payment in this case. And so long as we're all aware of that.
It seems like you're waiving these fees?
Well, there's nothing to collect. Right.
We have a standing order for fees, but we don't collect until there are monies to collect, and that includes my fees. I just got paid on a case. It was a 2003 case. That's when we started it, and my office got $400. So we all waive fees until that ward passes away, and the money is used for the ward's care and expenses as long as the ward is living.
Yeah, maybe waive isn't the good term to use. So it's not really a waiver, just based on collectability?
Collectability is a much
Okay.
better word, yes.
Is there a documentation about the fees and what instances arise for not collecting those fees?
As I said, we have a
I'm looking
standing
for it.
order from the court based upon what the Board of Supervisors requested, which is $180 an hour, approximately 2 hours a month. So we have a standing order for $360 an hour, or $360 a month. But if the ward has less than $2,000, there's monies are needed for, depends, cigarettes if they smoke, any other little things they may need. So it's just a matter of good conscience, I guess. There's no actual written thing that says we don't take that $360 from the ward. It's just that we know we have to use those monies for the ward's care.
I guess that brings up, I don't know. So I guess you look at it the same that we do on the ambulance. I don't know. This is just a theory and a discussion here, and with staff, this is an open discussion. So should the ward account, because you have a court order that says the fee is due, should it be assessed and then the Board of Supervisors quarterly
Writes it off?
writes it off? Because it says that should we have a policy in place that says if a ward does not have XYZ dollar or threshold, that one, it won't be assessed, or two, it will be assessed and written off? I don't know. I just think that some type of policy or procedure should actually be implemented and should be documented. So again, it protects people later on that says, why didn't you get the city fee? Or why did you charge Ward X but not Ward Y?
That's right. I was looking for the fairness.
Yeah, so is it
documentation of the
$2,001 you don't have to pay, but at $1,999, I'm just looking, should this actually be documented and written as to what we're going to do? And that protects staff to know when do you hit the account and when don't you hit the account.
Does the NRS say anything about the fees? Whether or not they?
No. The NRS does not state specifically what fees can and cannot be taken. It's just that the court has to approve any fees. So, yeah, it's kind of silent on that. I think it would be up to the Public Guardian's Office and the commissioners to design a policy. I do know if the ward does have, particularly if they have over $100,000 and they've got enough income to pay for their care, then we collect full fees. Just as a side note, Carson City is one of the few counties where the Public Guardian does pay more than 10% of their annual budget in fees. They collect more than that in fees. Most of the counties, Washoe County does collect pretty much what their annual budget is. So does Carson City. But like some counties in Lyon County, her annual budget, this was 2015, was $128,000, and she only collected $6,158 in fees. So Carson City is doing a lot better than most counties as collecting fees to reimburse for the Public Guardian's Office. We're doing even better than, Clark County, their budget is $2,400,000, and they only collected $500,000 in fees.
But again, my question really is, it's because they have a policy and they're writing it off to document it all?
I'm not aware of any specific written policy as to when they can collect fees. I know in Lyon County, the county manager just has basically put their foot down and say, no, you're not collecting fees. So I think it would be up to the supervisors and the Public Guardian to write a policy concerning fees, because there's nothing specific in the statute. The statute, NRS 253, just says that the Public Guardian can collect fees.
Well, I'm only speaking for myself, but I want a policy that protects the staff and all wards, that everyone is being treated
and that does
the same.
It does make a great deal of sense to do that. It's just not been done. And I know that up until about 2000, the Public Guardian's Office hardly collected any fees. So
Yeah, I'm not looking for a new revenue source. I'm looking for, like I said, actually accountability, a
and-
policy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that, again, Deborah's office is protected from a ward's family coming in saying, you took $300 a month from my family, and you didn't from her family.
Yeah,
Anyway, I think that we need to discuss this further about that.
This is Deborah Marsling, and yeah, I would hate to see any fees waived because sometimes the client gets a lump sum of money somewhere. And I would hate to have that waived when we can go back to when they should be paying, or, where maybe they haven't paid since 2014, and I can go back to that and add months.
Yeah, and certainly that's something we even can do in the ambulance. You can always collect it's a reversal of a bad debt, kind of like, right? We post it on the books and then you reverse it. It's a receivable that can sit out. Right. So again, I think we can work together, and I'm not saying it'll be an easy, quick little policy that gets written, but I think it's important. And I think accountability and fairness across the system is, and again, I just want to protect.
Yes.
You
and
know,
I
if
would
one were
welcome-
to read this, it would think that your staff potentially could be out on a target, and I really don't, and I want to protect the staff and the wards. And documentation and policy is what does that.
Right, and we would welcome any intervention from the finance department to help us do any of that. We just have never had that. So, thank you.
And I think that could lend what comes to the Board of Supervisors. Yes, we've got a policy now, and bring it to us. We're quarterly double-checking the master account, that all money's been moved to any ward account, if they have one, if they're just small. And I guess there's some wards that get just like $30 a month, so you're not going to go open a bank account for them. But that you do a summary review and say, yes, we found the money in the master account to be appropriate and pursuant to policy, right? Because should we not have a policy that says, if an individual's getting $1,000 a month, he should have his own bank account, that versus keeping it in the master account? And whatever those threshold answers are, I don't think we're suggesting what the answer is, but that the policy should be there.
And this is Laura Miles again. Actually, under the statutes, each ward is required to have their own individual account. We did for a while, due to embezzlement at one of the nursing homes, we did have a guardianship account which had several wards' income going in there, and that was just to make it easier because they didn't have that much money coming in to warrant bank fees and everything else like that. But since that has been resolved, do you have anybody in that account? No, all the wards have their own individual accounts.
Sorry. I do have a couple that only get $30 a month, and the bank charges $12.95 if they get less than $100 a month. So that money goes into the public guardian account.
Yeah.
And we keep the accounting by their names and how much it's going in once a month and how much we send out to the facility.
Maybe we could look the next time we're bidding bank services for the city to say they have to let us have ward accounts. And I'm just saying, there's no reason that we're getting charged $12.95 on a ward account. So maybe,
Yeah,
again,
most
we
of
can
them
have
are, if they're getting
staff
their
look.
Social Security in there and
Right.
it's, considered a direct deposit, they don't get charged. But there's, those are $500 and above. Anything, lower than 100, they're not going to give us a free account. And I bank with 6 different banks in town.
Maybe we can have, you're right, maybe we can have a staff look at doing something there to see what we can do, especially if, again, to me, I would understand why the law says it needs to be in its own bank account. Again, protections for everyone. It's a nice documentation that way. You can always go back and get a bank record to show the money taken from the account. So just thought.
So real quick, it sounds like there needs to be a policy. I mean, we've got to have prudent administration of the funds here. It's not tons of dollars we're talking about, but treating each ward fair and equitably makes sense. So does that policy get handled internally, or is it developed internally and then goes to the Board of Supervisors for approval? Or,
I think it would be up to us to actually discuss this one. The public guardian actually reports and is appointed by the Board of Supervisors. We do a lot of policies that we allow the city manager to do, but the city manager supervises those other individuals. So I'd have to discuss with the other members of the Board of Supervisors, but I really think it should be a policy that the Board of Supervisors approves.
And that's,
Since the position reports to them, and the accountability is to the Board of Supervisors, so that's really where my recommendation would sit, but.
we would recommend that in any area where it's an issue of public welfare. So those thresholds that are being set to determine when you're making decisions to spend money on awards medical care, that should be something that's discussed in a board meeting in open session.
One of the keys there is come up with a policy that's relatively simple to administrate because, with a limited staff, you can't, and it sounds like they've got some work to implement, policies and an administration of the asset liquidation right now. From reading these findings, looks like it was basically unauditable, right? You couldn't really, when I look at the findings, basically no documentation. Finding 4, 5, 8, 10, well, all of the asset liquidation findings basically tell me that it was almost impossible to audit.
But they weren't required to do that, so yes. So if we had found that in the court orders that it required full administration and had to abide specifically by state law, there would be some pretty significant findings. But because the court order said these are not required, then.
Yeah, but from an internal control standpoint, whether the court orders it and the state says that you have to do this, we still need to
Yes,
account for it prudently because it's.
That's why they're in the report.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it's not a compliance issue, then there'd be a real problem, but it's a matter of, it's something that needs to be done, and it just hasn't been done, and that's why we're here today. So, yeah, you bring up a real good point that this needs to be done. I just want, before we move on in this, because I think we're starting to want to get into the details, was there had Moss Adams, have you finished your report on this, or was there anything else you wanted to go over with us?
Yeah, those were the highlights.
Those are the highlights. Okay, good. I wasn't too sure if we're running down, if there's more. I just had a couple comments, and one of them is, it looks like there needs to be something of a supervisory or a reporting to, and it looks like it's the Board of Supervisors, but I'm wondering, Board of Supervisors mostly with policy, not with procedures, and I'm wondering if it wouldn't fit better with the city manager's office to be like overseeing some of this stuff and implementation and actually implementing a lot of these things.
Looking at us, huh?
Well, I'm just looking for some feedback. I mean, it is ultimately, but I guess we're talking about there needs to be. You've come out with a lot of findings, and we've got some recommendations, and I guess there's going to next be implementation, and who's going to be doing that? And I think some of it's going to happen internally as they're learning from this, but I think there needs to be somebody there's oversight on it, and then probably what we'd like to see is maybe a year from now, revisit and look at this and sort of check up like we've been doing with a lot of our departments to see how it's coming along and if things are moving forward and if these things are being taken care of. So I guess with all these comments, I guess my question is, who's going to be responsible to implement these, and even with the small staff, are they even able to maybe do a lot of these things? I mean, I think they maybe need help from the city manager's office. So that's my question. Supervisor Bagwell, do you have any comments on that? Being that it is right now, it's ultimate to the board, but I wouldn't think that the board would be getting into it at this detail.
Well, I don't either. That's not. I think the Board of Supervisors is responsible for the policy, and in that policy, it will direct who has a checkpoint or an authority for a validation, and that's kind of the discussion is, again, can we have the finance department do a quarterly review of the master account to make sure it reconciles and that the deposits have been moved to the wards account? Can we ask the finance department to work with the banks to eliminate fees so that we can have a ward account. Can we, one of the other thoughts I had was Laura Tadman. So we have these liquidators that are out there getting different fee amounts or non-documented fee amounts. So should we have a master service contract put together that Laura Tadman could work on for the liquidators and say every 2 years the city is accepting bids for liquidators, and here's the 4 that have qualified, met the conditions, and their maximum amount is 20% on a vehicle, 10% on everything, whatever. So I think it's going to take a myriad of everybody working together to accomplish this. So, but I think you have to start with where's the policy.
Yeah.
And then you worry, then,
Implement, who's gonna-
and then Nick and all his staff will get together and implement the component pieces of it.
The other thing that I kind of noticed is going through this is these are people they're caring for people, and so it's a requirement that they're social workers, but it's also a position that you really need a bit of clerical skills, and there's a lot of accounting, and it's kind of like a different skill set. So I think if there probably needs to be something in the policy manual, the employee handbook, that there's training. I mean, just the simple little video we saw earlier today, something like that for this department, so people understand what the procedures are and how to account for these things. And again, having the mechanism in place where somebody's reviewing this and looking at, so I think a lot of the focus is taking care of these people, but it's not so much in the documentation and everything else. They're focused on this part, and that's where problems can arise, where something could be. There could be a problem and somebody gets accused or something gets missed. So I think that probably part of this development of this policy is the people need to be trained. It needs to be part of the job description, that those skills are highlighted, and that's part of the job.
And this is Laura Miles again. Part of the problem is these are individuals that we're dealing with, and their information, especially their account information, their health information, is highly confidential. So whoever is involved with the Public Guardian's Office has to understand that confidentiality and has to understand that, the board does not have any right to say what medical bills are paid because the board doesn't pay them, and the board doesn't really have any right to say how the money's used. That's up to the court. So there has to be some ability to understand that, and if you're looking at policies and procedures and who's going to be looking at things the public guardian's doing, they have to realize that there is court oversight on all of this, and of course of the confidentiality issue, and that's very important. As far as training, the 2 social workers are required under social work statutes to get mandatory continuing education credits every year. Our public guardian is a certified guardian through the National Guardianship Association, and she's required to go attend their conferences as well. So there is some training, but the everyday office stuff, yeah. They have one person who does that and volunteers who help with the filing and the other things. So it might be better to look at getting another person in that office to help with that paperwork, to help with everything, so the social workers can go out and do the care conferences. The only person who does the banking is Debbie. That's limited to her, and because she's the one ultimately responsible. So as far as the actual day-to-day office stuff, maybe it would be better to have another person in there to help with that.
They actually currently have an accounting clerk that works full-time, city employee in the office.
Well, can I jump in for a moment? Nick Morano, city manager. So last year, just to pick up right where the CFO left off, if you remember, Supervisor Bagwell, we added an FTE to the Public Guardian office. The Public Guardian used to work over in the clerk's office. We had a change of clerk recorders. The clerk came to me and asked if we could shift. So I did shift her over. She's literally right next door to my office. I'd be more than happy to take a much more active role in the daily, monthly, quarterly, annual supervision of what the Guardian does. We're kind of already going down that road informally. It would be good, I think, if the board took it up as a matter of policy. I spoke with the mayor. If you look at some other counties, for example, they do a quarterly Guardian update to the Board of County Commissioners. It would probably also be a good idea as we work through the result of the audit here that we do that regular update to this committee as well. So you not only have a feel for where we are in terms of the findings of the report, but you have a good level of confidence that the Guardian's office is in fact not only providing superior service to the clients, but also we're protecting the fiduciary responsibility that we all share here. So I think it'd be a good idea if the board took it up from a policy point of view. And I also want to review the NRS because I'm cognizant of what's going on in Washoe County right now in regards to the jail. If you had been following that story, the county commission got in a little bit of hot water because they said, hey, the sheriff, separate elected official, we don't have any responsibility beyond approving his annual budget. Sure enough, in NRS, there's a responsibility for the Board of County Commissioners to do a quarterly inquiry into the condition and treatment of the prisoners. There could be something similar here that the Board of Supervisors may retain some level of routine oversight. I don't know off the top of my head if there is. So I'm seeing the head shaking no, so maybe there's not. But I do think it'd be a good idea if we did a quarterly Guardian report to the board. The Guardian could report on the status of the wards. I've looked at some other counties. I pulled Douglas County's report, and I see what their Guardian reports on a quarterly basis. Doesn't have to be a long agenda item, but I think it would provide a comfort level to the Board of Supervisors and then to this committee as well. And I'd be happy to go whatever route that the board wants to go. And I think the committee should I think it'd be a good idea if you made a recommendation to that.
And in terms of how other counties operate, we did look at a number of other counties as part of the best practice research that informed the report. And so the annual report is obviously a best practice that a number of counties do. Quarterly is great. You also have implementation built into the audit committee process that will help that the staff report to the board likely should designate some additional oversight for whatever period of time, either continually or until these findings are closed. We did find in other counties that the public guardian will often have a dotted line relationship to the city manager. So as part of taking this report to the Board of Supervisors, it would be the staff could recommend that the city manager oversee public guardian activities or provide consultation on certain actions for a certain period of time, and that would be totally in line with what other counties do.
Okay, are there any more comments or questions before, I think maybe there's a motion floating around here. I'm taking the next step.
So when we look at the electronic system, is there one with a price tag or something that you looked at for some others on the scanning system? Is there something that, what are we looking at before I go and make a recommendation, since I'll be on the other side of the table, right? Are we talking it's a $500 scanner for putting in the receipts? What is that one you buy at Office Depot? Yeah, 3-5. Is that all we're talking about? Is then they can just scan them right in?
This is Laura Miles again. I actually just bought a scanner for my office because we're finally putting my files on electronics. And I went up to Best Buy and spent less than $200 for a flatbed feed scanner, which ties into, we use laptops. We're not part of a network, just to keep the confidentiality of our files. And so I have an old laptop and a $200 scanner that has a 2-year warranty on it through Best Buy, which we're using.
And our recommendations here were to use the lowest cost, lowest complicated version of technology possible. We want to make sure that it could be implemented as quickly and painlessly as possible. So all you need is a scanner and someone to set up a just a standard document structure for each ward in the file system, and that's all it takes.
Not a particular program that we have to go by.
The
And okay.
cost is the staff time of scanning the existing files. And so if volunteers could be leveraged for that, that would be of no cost to the city. But that's really the biggest chunk here, is that when you have a whole lot of documents and some of them are electronic and some of them are not, you're going to have to scan them and get them in the right place. So that's the cost to the city at this point.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none, hearing none. Is there a motion to take this to the board and implement this?
So what do you guys think? I believe we should have quarterly, not annual, so.
Yeah.
Because their recommendation was an annual, but I really think it should be
I think quarterly,
quarterly.
yeah.
What do you guys?
Definitely quarterly.
Quarterly, you'd be more comfortable with quarterly too? Because, and I do think from even though the statute may not say that the Board of Supervisors has to have a report or anything of that nature, I do think it's still, so I'll speak for myself personally, being one, I do think it's our fiduciary responsibility. And if a person reports to you, you have a responsibility. So while we may delegate, trust me, we will, some activity to different staff members for accountability purposes, I do think we should go with quarterly reports to the Board of Supervisors and that we develop some, so what you guys think, quarterly?
I like the quarterly, and if you find in the future, after several years, that maybe we can go biannually or
we might be
once a
able
year,
to
maybe we could probably
modify that. I mean, we do Board of Health, we do quarterly. We're going to do the jails quarterly, and I think maybe we should just add the public guardian to the quarterly.
But I think it doesn't need to be a real high detailed report, just
Right.
a real macro report of what's going on, yeah.
And then we can be watching this particular audit at the board level closer for the implementation component. So I'm fine with making a motion to accept this audit and recommend, accept all the recommendations to the Board of Supervisor, but adding that we believe it should be a quarterly update and review by the board.
If you look on page 10, it says the recommendation is regular, and then the text is quarterly or biannual. Yeah.
We're picking quarterly.
So, well, you want to just repeat that motion? And was it limited to that, or was it also relating to the city manager's office being a little bit more involved with it and overseeing that?
I think that a policy has to be developed, and then in that policy, I don't think it's for this board to say whom the Board of Supervisors is going to select. I think that a policy needs to be developed, and then certainly in working with the city manager, we'll start picking the particular staff individuals to do what actions to implement this. So let me just ask it then differently to the city manager, is how long do you think it would take to come back to the Board of Supervisors with a policy to implement these recommendations and the fee write-off? So how much time do you need, do you think? Because I know that's what's going to happen to you at the Board of Supervisors level when they accept the report and say, okay, Nick, how long is it going to take to develop one?
As part of our work for this, we have the current process documented, and so that, and also some examples from other counties, so that should be, we can provide that information and speed up the process.
Short term, I would think by the end of June, we could pull that together. Bring it to the board on whatever that is, June 15th.
So let me ask it slightly differently then. So are you indicating that we could move this report, accept it to the Board of Supervisors, and that you bring it with a policy? You're saying you could already have a policy ready for the board to look at with this audit? You're that quick? I'm telling them not to do it either. That's why I'm like, really? You're good. No.
Yeah, I'll pull the policy together. I don't know how long it would take. I'm kind of looking for some input.
I can help. So we would start, typically when we develop a policy, we start with what the current practice is. And then you, as a board, take a look at that current practice and say, does this pass my smell test? And then you might change some of the information, some of the dollar amounts, thresholds, time limits that are in current practice, and that's how you would come to your policy. So getting that base policy together as a draft to bring to the board shouldn't take a significant amount of time.
Yeah, my suggestion would be 60 to 90 days. Because part of what, I think the biggest part that you have to consider is, right, we're talking about two things. There's the taking care of the wards, and I think that's in good hands. And then there's sort of the administering the office, right? The drudgery of that. When you deal with the policy, part of what Steve was mentioning is important. You want to keep it simple, but you also want to keep it flexible. We don't want to make it too rigid for them that suddenly they're boxed in. And so that's going to take some consideration, I think, is what's the right sort of balance there. So I think giving yourself some time to ponder that with the folks would be
I'm going with that too, because looking at what some of these issues are, I think that you're going to have to do some what did we call it, that value engineering study that we do, and to really look at where can we put other resources to help, especially if we're going to look to scanning the old files. So I hate to have you say, oh yeah, here's the policy, and we go, wow, how are you going to implement that? So I'm comfortable with, 90 days, and again, doing quarterly reports if everyone else is.
Just for clarification, so were you speaking to, initially the conversation was about a policy specific to bank accounts and that $2,000 threshold and when the city gets paid. So you want a policy higher level about the operations authority associated with how public guardian is?
Absolutely.
Okay. So then that is 60 to 90 days.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to.
Helping you here, Nick.
And
I appreciate your June enthusiasm.
And I think what you want, either with that or subsequent to that, is then just an implementation plan, which is what you're getting at, Lori, is, okay, so how do we, it takes a village, right? So how do we help them get the things in place that they need, and then maybe you come back in a year and you've had sufficient number of wards in and or dealt with that you can say, okay, are the things in place now that weren't in place at this time, and how's it look?
I know there are some things that need to be in place ASAP. We have one ward that has personal property that's going to have to go into storage. And so that was one of the situations in the audit was, where do you put the assets? Well, there's no place to put the assets. So the city is going to have to come up with some place for storage of ward's assets, especially if the ward doesn't have the ability to pay for that storage. And that's one situation that's coming up pretty quickly. And so as far as implementing some of the suggestions, those are going to have to happen sooner than later.
And so how is it, they had assets within the home and the home is sold, so now you don't have anywhere to put
Right.
the asset?
They have assets in the home. The home is going to be sold, but we're anticipating placing her in another residence as soon as her exploitive family member is sentenced. Then we can release her from where she is and put her in a more comfortable situation, but we need to hold on to those assets, and it may be 6 to 9 months, but we're going to need someplace to put those assets before the end of this month.
And so let me then ask, on that type of a case, do we then recoup storage fees out of the sale of the home?
Yes, we can. The problem is the standard storage unit will not rent a storage unit to, the public guardian doesn't have a budget to pay for those fees except out of the ward's assets. So she doesn't have a slush fund that she can use to hire a storage unit. So, this is she doesn't have any money that's available to her to pay or prepay for needs for the ward until certain items can be sold. She has to get that money from the ward's estate now.
But we will, so again, the city would have to give an appropriation then to go do the storage and then recover it.
Now, several of the counties, for instance, Monroe County, they have a trailer, a box, whatever it is, a cargo box that they have for the public guardian to use. And he can put any number of wards assets in there. It's keyed to him and only him.
Right.
And that might be an option if those are available somewhere. But, you know, some of these suggestions are not something that we can sit and wait on. Some of them are going to be needed to be done sooner.
Is there any recommendations in here that staff does not feel we can implement? Because what I'm generally used to having is you get audit recommendations, and then I would get a typed-up report back from the staff saying we can implement number 1 by said date, number 2 by this date. We don't accept this recommendation because it would cost us too much money, and so I guess we're just going to go at this one a little bit different, but there are all these recommendations staff is comfortable with accepting and that we can implement and work with the city manager to, some of them, like you said, he may implement in 30 days, but that we're all comfortable he'll have 90 days to, I'm giving him 90, I'm with that we'll get a report back in 90 days with recommendations for implementation of all of these. Is that what I'm getting, that staff's comfortable accepting all of them? Yes, Nick?
Deborah?
Yes, everybody's good? Okay, I just don't want somebody coming back 90 days go, nope, number 5's impossible.
Well, no, I do
Okay.
want to be able to bring that back up. I apologize, I was
That's
making
okay.
a note. I definitely want to be able to review all the recommendations, all the findings. If there are any of those that I believe would be impossible or would be cost prohibitive to implement, I would like the ability to come back and communicate that.
And in the report, there are only 2 recommendations that have a cost associated with them, and that's a scanner and a storage unit.
And potentially
And we can
somebody
do
else
both of them.
scanning the back documents.
Yeah, although the department is looking into volunteer administrative support.
That will
So
scan
that-
it all.
So that's the ideal situation. We don't recommend additional FTEs at this
Okay.
time.
And they also have an operating supply budget in there in the public guardian department that could be used for some of these expenses.
Okay, well, I'd like to kind of like bring this from a landing so we can wrap things up. Then I think if we have a motion as far as accepting the support taken to the board and directing that there be a policy set up. Do I have a motion for that?
Okay, I move to approve the audit submitted by Moss Adams for the Public Guardian, and that a quarterly report be accepted on the recommendation instead of the annual. We will select quarterly, and that the city manager will bring back a proposed implementation and policy within 90 days.
A second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Good. All right. Thank you. That was thorough and a lot of information there. And what I would like to do is probably in the future, maybe come back and revisit this in a year from now to see where everybody's at and how things are progressing. I'm talking, well, I don't think they're going to get everything done in 90 days.
You mean the follow-up
Yeah,
on each?
exactly.
Okay. Right, never mind.
That's really fast.
Yeah.
Okay, next item, last item on the agenda is 6D, possible action. Moss Adams has been our internal auditor for about 5 years now. We do an annual renewal of their contract, and it was discussed last year, the possibility of maybe at this time recommending to that we do a request for a proposal for services, and just like to open that up for discussion now. Any comments from the other committee members?
what was done last time that it came up?
This came up about 5 years ago. Actually, it was the first time we went through this process. We were really looking at having a contracted internal auditor, which hadn't really been done before. And we had a request for proposal, and we had two firms and an individual come and make the proposals, and Moss Adams was chosen out of that. Since that time, we've been working with them, and being it's 5 years, and I know last year we brought it up in the meeting, we thought we should probably be considering if we want to do another request for proposal, see if Moss Adams even wants to keep on doing this, see if there's anybody else out there, but just to evaluate everything, taking a fresh look at things. So that's what this agenda item is about.
So I'll give you some thoughts. So I've got two issues. I think we're potentially pretty late in the process for an FY18 RFP and selection of someone different. So I'm questioning whether we should put the RFP out for FY19, and that it's just a technical question, or we'll just, because how are they going to give us the results from any of the audit work that they still need to complete? So I guess I'm just technically asking how we're going to work on that. Would they owe us, and everything would be accrued back to the prior audit period, but they would be reporting in July or August the completion?
I think, I think
go forward 9 months? You know, I'm just working that out. How are we going to do that?
Yeah, I agree. And thinking this out, I'm kind of thinking that we probably, to think of this, because their contract comes up at the end of June, so we're not really looking at making a change right now. So it's really probably a year from now. But it's a matter of probably as we get closer, I guess the motion would be, if we wanted to go out and put an RFP, it would be direct staff that they would know the timetable about how much time. I don't know how much time they gave the last time. We need about 90 days before the end of the fiscal year, and also or the contract year, and also for us to, sort of time it so things are kind of getting wrapped up, so we're not left in the lurch and everything is wrapped up, so that if there is a transition. But, so yeah, I agree completely. I think that if we do an RFP, and probably we should, we just direct staff to be getting things in motion so that it would happen for next year.
So what's the plan for 2018?
That's the plan for 2008. Well, you're talking about 17, 18, or 18, 19?
I'm talking about what happens July 1st.
Yeah.
July 1st.
So we can
wouldn't have
actually
anybody in place.
amend their contract to extend the time period. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, actually, though, so I want to, that's why I said I have two issues. I do want to do an RFP, because I believe it's just prudent. Things change, opportunities change. Other people might bid, we might want to go in different directions, whatever. I just think that it's prudent business to bid every so many years. And so I do want to direct staff to put out an RFP, but I think we should retain them for FY18 because we needed to do this 6 months ago. So, and staff can do the right timing and all of that for FY19.
Quick question, is there any kind of policy set by the Board of Supervisors on required RFP procedures, how frequently external services to the city are?
No, we don't, there's nothing there.
No,
Okay.
there isn't, but I can tell you that we've certainly been making the move to try to bring things back within most of ours. I think the maximum we've been doing anymore is like 5 years. So we're trying to really get into that cycle because, again, it's just good business practice. So I think if we use them as an amendment for 18 and direct staff to go out to bid for 19, we'd get it in time to have someone on board. It could be them if they want to bid. That's up to them.
And this is strictly internal audit services, right? Okay.
It's kind of like this is the internal auditor. And really, 5 years is good because we've gone through a lot of transition in developing this thing in the last 5 years. It has gone from nothing and with a lot of growing pains. So now I feel like we've got a pretty good system in place. And like Supervisor Bagwell said, over the next year, we could probably have some of our agenda to kind of like discuss the direction we're going in so we can be prepared before that happens. So it's not like we're just going to wait until, next January or February, but we'll probably keep that in mind as far as we see the results of these things coming in, looking back and what direction we want to go in. Each year when we do renew the contract, we do talk about the audit projects and what we're planning on doing for the next year. And it's my understanding that you're going to be presenting a proposal as far as, do you have something? I guess that's not on the agenda today. I guess it's going to come in the next meeting.
No, but for the new audit committee members, so each year we bring to you in June, suggested projects for the next fiscal year, and then that's by design for discussion with the audit committee. We usually try to make that list, longer than what the budget affords, so you can prioritize. Then those are recommended to the Board of Supervisors, and the board is the one who approves both the audit program and then who's going to do it, right?
Well, I've seen it, and we've talked about this before, where we have like a component, a percentage of this is internal control review, like a real internal control. Part of it's performance measures, and then other is just kind of like auditing and looking at where there might be particular areas that there might be a problem to look at. So we've kind of sort of changed a little bit. We weren't even really focusing on internal controls until the past year or so. So now we're starting to move into that. So we're starting to get into where it's a bit of everything, not just a pure internal control environment. So as we come up, I guess, in our next meeting, then, Mark, you're going to be supplying a proposal of some of the different things, we can, possible projects. And also, too, I think part of that is to look at things we've audited in the past and possibly go back and do a quick revisit. I think that's kind of one of the things we're wanting to do, to make sure that the work that they've done, that we're going back and there's follow-through. We go through, we do a study, and then we don't hear about it, and is anything being changed? So I think departments need to know we will follow through as well. So I think as part of the proposal, those are the main components: internal control, review, performance measures, and we'll just, as we discuss it, figure out what mix we're going to need for the coming year. And
Perhaps this was done last time too, but when you think about internal audit, it's usually in many organizations, it's an internal function that reports either into legal or the CFO, depending, and that's something for consideration. Is when you look at the total cost of the city spending for outsourcing internal audit, would it make more sense at this point to, in 2019, to insource it and have somebody, a full-time auditor, in-house? So something else to consider, just a thought.
Yeah, we talk about that, and we have some history on that, and there's a reason why we're doing it this way. We'll be glad to discuss that more, but again, we can have these discussions, and then we'll now have 9 months to a year to start working on that. So any more comments on that then? I guess we just need a motion as far as, directing staff to put together and get the mechanics going so that we have an RFP for the next cycle.
I make a motion to direct staff to amend the existing contract for Moss Adams for FY18, and this committee to start looking at the RFP for FY19 with staff.
Second.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I just want to make sure that it's compliant with the agenda as titled.
I'll give it my best. I make a motion for staff to direct an amendment to the contract for Moss Adams to add FY18 to their contract, and for an RFP process to be created for FY19.
Can you amend the contract?
Is the issue about renewing the contracts not part of the agenda item?
It's not, and if you don't have to put, if you
Yeah,
could
so
revise, if you
Yeah.
could, if,
FY19 RFP.
right,
Yeah,
and
so let me,
staff has direction to amend the contract. I think
Perfect.
that's fine, but for the motion, if you could just talk to the RFP.
okay, so I'll withdraw that motion and add a new motion for the committee and staff to work on a RFP for FY19 for the audit committee.
Okay.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. With that, the next item, as far as our next meeting, I guess I always look at Mark. I always look at Mark at this point and say, Mark, when are you guys going to be ready? Because I think we have that item in June. You're looking at cleaning, finishing up the internal controls and all. How soon? Are we looking at early June, middle June, late June?
Looking at my calendar, I was going to suggest June 27th, at least as a first try.
Okay. All right. I don't have my calendar here, so I'm going to have to go back and check on that. I know I got a few things happening at the end of the month, but I'll have to check back. Do you have an alternate date? If June 27th, what's a? If you have
It's
one
not
alternate?
going to. Sorry, it's not going to be a Tuesday. If it is,
Yeah.
28th. Sorry.
Okay. And if we did, otherwise we would push it into July. What would be the first Tuesday in July? It's not too close to the 4th, is it?
That would be the 4th.
That would be the 4th. Okay, the following Tuesday then, the 11th.
That's a problem for me.
That's going to be a problem for you?
Yep.
Should we write down the 27th tentatively?
Well, but the 27th, well, yeah.
He was just like, I think he was just looking for a backup.
Yeah, well, I just want to get a few, and then because I don't have my calendar in front of me, I have to go back and check. I know there's some things that are going to be happening at the end of the month, so I can't remember if it's the 27th or not. So we've got the 27th, and we have the 28th. Would the 28th work out for everybody? Sure. Being outside is, yeah, same, like 3 o'clock we're looking at? Is that unanimous? 27th would be okay? How about the 28th? Okay, all right. So it looks like we got 27th, 28th, and then if we did have to push into July, the earliest you could do in July is, what, the 18th?
Well, it just depends on whether we're sticking to Tuesdays. I just appear to have problems.
I guess if we're looking like we're close in June, I'd like us to get it as quick as possible, not push this thing off too, because we're...
Like the 12th of July.
Okay, all right, then we just do that then.
We have RTC in here on that day.
That day.
The 12th.
What time is that?
4:30. And then, yeah.
So we could do it 2 to 4 probably, yeah, okay. So the 12th, and that would be at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, I cannot do the 28th.
You can't do the 12th?
Yeah.
All right. All right, tell you what, there's...
No, 28th.
Oh, the 28th. Oh, you can't do the 28th. All right, 28th.
No.
But the 12th, okay? Is everybody good on the 12th?
Yes.
Okay.
12th is fine.
All right, so we look at the 27th and the 12th.
I'd rather do the 12th than the 27th.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'd rather do the 12th and the
12th and
27th?
27th, yeah.
It seems like everybody wants to do the 12th.
and the 27th.
Okay, all right. All right, so let's go for the 12th, and we'll just kind of confirm. And, yeah. At 2 o'clock. So you have that.
And so just so you know, we should have 3 items for that meeting: the procurement testing, the IT testing, and suggestions for the next year's fiscal program.
Right, that's an, yeah.
And then at that time, you'll want to take action on recommendations to the board for the program, and then that's when you can deal with recommendations to the board relative to who's performing it.
Okay. Good, all right. With that being settled, are there any?
Question.
Oh, go ahead.
When do we talk about the FY 17?
That's going to be the next meeting.
Okay,
That's
so
going to be the
that's
next meeting.
the
Yeah.
audit-
So he's going to bring that up.
audit
We're going to have
plan.
our proposal in.
Okay,
So,
got it.
so we're going to be completing those projects. Hopefully we'll have enough time for all this. We'll complete those projects.
We should. It's the 12th of July now.
But, you know, well, I mean, enough time in the meeting, you know, because I think we're going to go at 2 and we have to be out here,
About
4:30. Yeah.
Because Campo, then RTC.
Yeah, so it gives us 2.5 hours. So we should be okay on that.
Well, that's in your hands on how many questions you ask.
Yeah. I'll just be rude and start cutting people off. Move it along. Okay, is there any public comment at this time? Looking around, seeing none. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.